Functional analysis of behavior is a science. But what does that mean? What is the purpose of science? And how does it go about attaining that purpose? Hi, my name is Dr. Igor Juricevic, and this is Functional Analysis of Behavior. Let's go. Today we're going to zoom out even further than we did last time, and we're going to take a look at what is the purpose of science. So again, functional analysis of behavior is based on scientific findings, it's based on scientific research. So what is the purpose of science? And that's going to help illuminate what we're doing here in functional analysis of behavior. So the basic framework for this, we're going to take from Cooper, Heron, and Heward, and they stated that the overall goal of science is to achieve a thorough understanding of the phenomena under study. Different types of scientific investigations yield knowledge enabling one or more of the three levels of understanding: description, prediction, and control. So taking that as a starting point, we're going to go through each of those points. So first off, we'll break it down by taking a look at the phenomenon under study. So for our purposes, as we saw in the last video, the phenomenon under study is socially important behaviors. That is what we are trying to understand in functional analysis of behavior. But how do we get to that understanding? So science has different types of investigations that yield different types of scientific knowledge, and this knowledge comes at three levels of understanding. And those three levels are description, prediction, and control. So let's start with description. Description comes from the systematic observation of facts. You then go out to the world, you take a look at what's going on, you observe and collect that data, and this produces a collection of facts about observed events that can then be quantified, classified, and examined for potential relations, potential connections to other known facts, other observed data. So an example of this from the field of applied behavior analysis comes from Mary Alice White's study of natural rates of teacher approval and disapproval in the classroom. So in this study, Mary White went into classrooms and just observed what are the rates of verbal approval and verbal disapproval in classrooms at different grade levels. And that's what the study was. It was a collection of data. It was going out and collecting, observing what are these rates of disapproval and approval in the classroom in order to collect those facts to understand the phenomenon under investigation, which in this case were the rates of approval and disapproval from teachers. So that yielded scientific understanding, but it yielded it at a level of description. It gave us a collection of facts that we could then go to see if there are possible connections between those facts and other facts. The next level of scientific understanding is prediction. And prediction is when repeated observations, that repeated description, reveals that two events consistently co-vary with each other. And what we mean by co-vary is that in the presence of one event, another event occurs with a specific probability, or in the presence of one event, another event does not occur, also with a specific probability. So co-vary either means that we've established a predictive relationship where if one event occurs, another event occurs with a predicted probability, or if one event occurs, then the other event does not occur, also with a predicted probability. And a nice example of this in applied behavior analysis comes from McKercher and Thompson's study on a descriptive analysis of potential reinforcement contingencies in the preschool classroom. So what they did in this study is they took a look at the reinforcement contingencies that followed problematic behavior. So in a number of trials, they observed problematic behavior, and then they observed what follows problematic behavior, what is associated with problematic behavior, what co-varies with problematic behavior. And what they found was that in the presence of problematic behavior, in the presence of that event, problematic behavior, attention occurred 100% of the time. So attention occurred in 100% of those collection of trials. In another example, they looked at problem behavior and material presentation. So problem behavior and material presentation, do those two go together? And what they found was that in the presence of problem behavior, you had material presentation about 79% of the time. And then lastly, problem behavior, event number one. Escape from the task, event number two. They found that in the presence of problem behavior, escape from the task occurred with a probability of 33%. So this predictive study showed that these two were related, that these events were related. Problem behavior with the presentation of attention, problem behavior with the presentation of material goods, problem behavior with the ability to escape from a particular task. All of those were shown to be co-varying together, where in the presence of one, there was a certain probability that another event would occur. Another example of prediction comes from Mary White's study on the natural rates of approval and disapproval in grade levels. So what they found was that as grade level increased, the rate of approval decreased. And notice that that is, again, a co-varying relationship. So as one variable goes up, that is grade level, another variable goes down, that is rate of approval. And notice that you can then use one event to predict the other event. So for example, I could tell you the grade level that a student is in, and you would be able to predict what their rate of approval is that they are exposed to. So for example, looking at this graph over here, this table over here, if I told you that a student is in the 10th grade, you would be able to predict, well, the rate of instructional approval for that student is going to be about 10%. And likewise, it goes the other way. If I told you that the rate of approval of a student is over 50%, you would be able to predict, well, that student is probably in grade one, again, taking that from the data that we have in the graph. So knowledge of one event allows you to predict the occurrence of another event with a certain degree of probability. That is a prediction level of scientific understanding. All right, and the final level of scientific understanding is the strongest one, and that is control. And control is when you have a functional relation between two events. So this was outlined in Johnston and Pennypacker's Strategies of Tactics and Behavioral Research. The textbook mentions the second edition. We are currently now in the fourth edition. But importantly, they outlined the idea of this functional relationship. And what that is when you discover a relation between two events. And this is discovered when a well-controlled experiment demonstrates that the specific manipulation of one event causes the specific change in another event. So it's not just that one event can be used to predict another event, it's that one event actually causes that other event. And we'll talk about more about experimental design in the future, talk about independent and dependent variables, but at this time I just want you to understand that that functional relationship is that cause and effect relationship, where a change in one variable causes a change in a second variable. So it's important to realize that this is the strongest level of scientific understanding, but it's built upon the previous levels, because you cannot get to prediction without description, and you can't get to control without prediction. So prediction always reveals the possibility of a functional relationship, but it's very important to notice, to remember that it does not guarantee a functional relationship. So again, prediction reveals the possibility of a functional relationship between those two variables, but it does not guarantee the control. It does not guarantee that functional relation. So for example, in the previous study, we mentioned the teacher approval rates went down as grade level increased. Now, that leads to a possible functional relation. So it's possible that as grade level increases, the rates of teacher approval decrease, that the increase in grades actually causes the decrease in the amount of approval that teachers give out. On the other hand, it might be other factors that are involved here. Maybe older children don't react as well to high levels of approval rates, and therefore that's the cause. It's the age of the child, not the grade level, that is actually the cause of those decreased approval rates. It could be some other factor that is the cause of those decreased approval rates. So for example, in the older grade levels, maybe the teachers aren't there with the students for the entire day, and they don't have as much of a connection with them, and that leads to the lower amount of teacher approval rates. So we need to manipulate each of those potential causes in an experimental scenario in order to discover if there is a functional relation between the two. So prediction gave us the possibility that a functional relationship exists, and now it's up to experimentation to find out if there is a functional relationship. And if we find that functional relationship, then we have control. Then we can change one event by manipulating a second event. So we can change a problem behavior by manipulating the cause of the problem behavior, and that's what we're going to be doing in functional analysis of behavior. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's video. So we took a look at the 3 levels of scientific understanding: description, prediction, and control. We took a look at some applied behavior analysis examples where description, prediction, and control were used. And importantly, we made the point that control can only be established with careful experimentation, where you manipulate the causes and see if they produce the effects. So that is it for today. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to come back next time when we take a look at the assumptions and attitudes of science. But until then, stay frosty, stay functional, and I'll see you next time. Functional analysis of behavior is a science.